Guild Wars 2 Visions of Eternity update, Elite Specializations, beta feedback, Guild Wars 2. Greetings adventurers, back in August, we ran a beta event to test and collect feedback regarding our 9 new Elite Specializations that made their debut into Guild Wars 2 Visions of Eternity. Launches on October 28th. Today we're going over the feedback we received and what changes we'll be making to each Elite Specialization for launch. This blog will outline what we feel are the most impactful changes at a broad level. The full list of changes will be detailed in the expansion release notes. To kick things off, we've received feedback during the beta that some of the Elite Specialization emblems didn't represent the mechanics and themes that were present. To better align with the art design, we'll be updating the icons of the Antiquary, Thief, and Luminary Guardian during our first major update in the expansion early next year. Okay, I could see that being pretty worthwhile. So what, are they just going to make it a torch? Amalgam Engineer. Feedback regarding the Amalgam landed in a solid state for the beta. Among some balance tuning, Amalgam is receiving a new Grandmaster Trait replacing Contagious Mutation, which shared strain bonuses to allies. Okay. Contagious Mutation was a niche trait compared to its neighbors, and its existence limited the effects that we could put on strains as we had considered them being given to allies. Contagious Mutations removal allows us to keep strains strong and interesting while also making room for new Grandmaster traits that can open up a new role for the Amalgam. Okay, so that leads me to believe they kind of want the Amalgam to be a booner. But it kind of leaves a question as to which boon they want it to be. Quickness or Alacrity. So, that'll be interesting. The new Grandmaster Trait, New Genes, provides boons to allies when morph skill is used, as well as additional boons based on which specific morph skill was used. In PvE, the generic boon will be Alacrity, allowing the Amalgam to mold into more supportive playstyle with these gameplay changes as well as more visual updates. It's never been a better time to slide. That's a good meme. Alright, so they wanted to compete with Mechanist as an Alac heal and as an Alac DPS. I could see it being a very viable power Alac. Potentially Conduit too. We just have to see how the numbers play out. Like, they could definitely balance it to be either or. Like, maybe they make Mechanist like the higher, harder one to do, and then they make Mechanist the easier one to play, and then Amalgam like the harder one to play. Antiquary Thief. Dude, the amount of Reddit threads I saw about people hating this. Okay, dude, they should literally just change this to the Scrit emblem, dude. Just make it a Scrit emblem. Honestly, they just need to be the Rat God, okay? We've taken steps to reduce the amount of guesswork required while playing the Antiquary. For starters, we've made the split deck trade baseline mechanic while the Elite Specialization is equipped. You will now always obtain one offensive and one defensive art attack whenever you pilfer, regardless of the traits you have equipped. All artifacts now additionally give unique, temporary bonus effects to the Antiquary after activation, allowing for additional strategic choices even after the corresponding artifact has been used. As an example, using Metal Legion Guitar grants an effect that allows the Antiquary to use sneak attacks for a short period of time, even when not in stealth. Traits have also been reworked. Split Deck has been replaced with Repeat Ransacker, which reduces the recharge of Scrit Swipe whenever you use an artifact. Possessive Hoarder has had its boons altered to now grant its effects to allies around you as well. Lastly, Double Edge skill icon now will have a different appearance whenever they are used while on cooldown to differentiate them from the regular skill cooldowns. Okay, nice. Conduit, baby. This is the one we wanted, the one we were waiting for. This is the only one. And I'm the only person you should hear about this one. Everyone else is wrong. Look at that beautiful Raza. We love him. Fuck. I just kind of broke it. The majority of the feedback on Conduit gameplay revolved around the Conduit's profession mechanic and the bonuses being too passive. As a result, we've made several changes to his Elite Specialization to make it more rewarding for players who wish to play the Conduit more proactively. Yeah, I could see that being a good argument, although there was two current versions of the way of playing the Conduit. There was the power, which was a lot more like setup based, whereas like, oh, you use your 3 skills and then boom, you F2 just before you legend swap, and then you pretty much repeat that process. So you're pretty much like your aim is to like F2 at the end of like every one of your F1 loops. So like when you're like just about running out of energy, you want to change to the second one. But the problem with it was that like the assassin legend was trash. It did nothing besides cripple. And so like for power, the only legend that like you pretty much were locked in, you needed to get the legendary what is it? Entity stance, whatever it was. And basically you needed that to get damage for like the 3-second scythe attack every couple of seconds. But even then it wasn't as great. And the payoff just wasn't as big of like a burst as what you would get from like if you stockpiled energy and you were just like, say for example, a Vindicator, a Renegade. It felt like a power class, but it felt like whenever you play Chrono Monster and the burst is delayed. That's how it kind of felt. But then after you had that initial burst, you kind of like, because of the energy mechanics, you didn't really have another burst for like another 10 seconds. And it wasn't like an insane burst like what you would have with the other classes. Like say, for example, Scrapper has its insane Bloodstone burst. This was a bit less reliable. As for the Conduit was definitely very true with what they're saying here. The Conduit was pretty much, you put your F2 on, you made sure you swapped under 10 energy, and you did whatever you could to maintain enough energy to upkeep the Demon F2. Which was considered the Mesmer, just so that you had the additional condies whenever you hit the boss. So it definitely felt a lot more passive, but it also felt very punishing to play in a way that like the F2 didn't really work well. And then there was also the case of one of the 3 elite traits not functioning at all. It was the one whenever you see CFO or whenever you use your F2 that you would daze people around you and inflict burning. That would go put your F2 on cooldown every single time you CC'd the boss and just wouldn't function. So basically like it cut you off at the kneecaps. It was very bad and did not function as intended at all. Cosmic Wisdom has been moved to the F3 slot, and their effects have been altered to provide bonuses specifically for the legend that each form represents. As an example, Form of the Assassin now fires lesser enchanted daggers at enemies close to you whenever you use a legendary assassin skill, while channeling impossible odds. So the Form of the, this is good. So this is what I think a lot of people wanted, where they wanted the Form of the Assassin to feel like an assassin, because like applying cripple and chill, cripple, yeah, it was like cripple and like weakness, I think it was. Pretty good on PvP, but like in PvE it was just really bad. Like you didn't care about it. Like you cared about the stats you got, but that was pretty much it. So the fact that like whenever you have impossible odds on, when you're playing PvE and you're a DPS class, you always have impossible odds on while you're DPSing, at least while you're in that legend. So this is good, which means pretty much you're just constantly getting more damage from that, which is pretty good. I hope they line up the ICD to be in line with the impossible odds ICD. So it kind of forces it to proc easier. Invoking a different legend will now automatically switch your form to match the new legend, ensuring that you always will be able to make the new functionality of Cosmic Wisdom even when moving to a different legend. This is overall a... It's a buff to the power, definitely. But I wouldn't consider it... It might actually be a nerf to the Condi, because I don't think you actually care about having the Cosmic Wisdom change over to Demon. Or not to Demon. To Entity, you want it always in Demon / Mesmer. You never want it out of that, because then you're just not inflicting conditions. I would have to go over and look and make sure that the Cosmic Wisdom for Entity actually inflicts condition. I think from memory it might inflict bleeding, but I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't believe it does. I think the skills that empowered and the elite inflicted bleeding, but I don't think the actual Cosmic Wisdom did. In case of Cosmic Wisdom, a release potential has been added to the F2 slot. These are a set of skills that are automatically equipped depending on your active legend. So players will have access to 2 different release potential skills based on the legends you bring to combat. Certain aspects of these skills will scale based on the amount of affinity you have built up, encouraging the use of other legendary skills before this one in order to maintain the maximum effect. pretty much this is probably going to play out how the other one did, where you just run the trait that gives you affinity by using weapon skills, because unfortunately the way Revenant functions and the way a lot of the classes are apart from Entity is you don't really use much inside of the class apart from the drain skill. There is a few exceptions to this, but the exceptions are not in the core mechanic themselves. So the exceptions to this is Renegade Stance, which you don't have access to, obviously, because you're not a Renegade. You're like, so it's all the core Revenant stances. Their damage skill that you want to upkeep is like a drain skill. Demon Elite, Impossible Odds from Assassin, the Hammers on Dwarf, and the bubble on Ventari, which, let's be real, is absolutely going to gimp you on this class. Like, you are never taking Ventari as this. Like, it's too much damage loss. Anyway, for example, Release Potential Assassin is an attack that sends out 3 increasingly large shockwaves from yourself that damage enemies and immobilize them and are struck by all 3 waves. This increases the damage and greater immobilized duration depending on how much affinity you have accumulated. That sounds really cool. That I want to see how that looks. I am a bit worried that they didn't mention anything about the third trait being broken, which I hope means they're aware that it's broken. But they probably are. It's highly unlikely that they don't realize it's broken, right? Surely they know. Evoker Elementalist. A big point of feedback was that the Evoker's trait line tried to do too many things. The element-themed traits were flavorful and helped to further define the playstyle of each familiar, but they took up a lot of space and that could be used for other things, like addressing the lack of sport burns. We still like what most of these traits brought to each of the familiars, so we're deciding to make them passive bonuses tied to each familiar. For example, while you're accompanied by the otter, you will always heal allies and grant them regeneration. Damn. Alright, that's kind of strong. Might be kind of crazy, but I hope then they at least make it so that, oh, that kind of limits them as well. So as well as that's a good thing, it kind of locks them into not being able to make this a quickness and an alac giver, but we'll kind of see. As we mentioned in the previous stream for the Evoker, we suspected that the utility skill bonuses could be more than a stun break, and the majority of the feedback that we saw agreed, so we went ahead with some of the improvements to those. We also saw a ton of feedback for the ability to enable auto-attacking for familiar skills. Our initial investigation found that this would require a complex technical change and needs more time to ensure quality and stability, but rest assured that it's a high priority for the team, and that we'll release it as soon as it's ready. Okay, so they won't have it on release, but they'll be adding it later at a later stage. Obviously, they don't mention any changes to numbers and that sort of stuff because, you know, the Evoker was absolutely disgusting as a Connie DPS. Like, I'm pretty sure the Connie Quick was like at 50k. It was insane. Gale Shot Ranger, one of the cooler ones they added, honestly. Gale Shot aimed high and shot true over the beta week. There's always room for improvement, and there's a bird's eye view of the adjustments that we've made. The largest change will be to the Gale Shot's arrow generation. Getting arrow was largely a passive experience, and there weren't enough options to add arrow generation to your build. In the beta, we saw that in PvE, most of the Gale Shot's strength came from triggering the Strike Grandmaster Trait rapidly. We are happy to see Gale Shot reward the projectile-focused builds we saw utilizing Strike. But we want to make sure the playstyles built around the other Grandmaster traits are also viable. Strike's arrow generation capabilities are going to be lowered, and Squall's skills will now grow on arrows on use. This will help the Grandmaster traits stay in parity with each other, while also making arrow generation a more active process. Okay. So they don't want it to feel like a passive thing, like kind of how Firebrand passively gets its tome pages back over time. They want to make it sort of like a thing of like, oh, to get pages, you got to like use this skill or use this utility, or, you know, it's a nice idea. More interactive. I'm always a fan of. That's why I like the Bloodstone Relic. The Bloodstone Relic feels very interactive. I think the Bloodstone Relic is a very healthy change. I think there's some relics that could probably use work. Like, I'm not a huge fan of Steam Shrieker's Relic. It is pain and suffering. But Honestly, it's good to see that they're not looking to make a lot of stuff more passive. To add, like, the thing is, you kind of want to increase that skill ceiling. So by making it more active, you kind of raise that skill ceiling while lowering the skill floor. There's a lot of relics that are pretty low on the skill floor, like Thief or Eagle. So at the end of the day, it's a pretty good change. I'm pretty happy with it. Additionally, Fetch, the Master Trait that also aided in arrow generation, is being reworked towards Thrill of the Catch. Granting an arrow when you or a pet disable an enemy's squall skills will also be usable changes such as Whirlwind, Stun Breaks, Perfect Storm being castable while moving, and Minstrel becoming a dome. Okay. I think a lot of these sound good. The disabling an enemy, I hope they make it work on structures. There's some things in this game that don't work on structures, which make, like, a lot of people don't know that, like, when you do CA, you need a lot of stuff doesn't work. I believe Spellbreaker, the one that requires CC, doesn't work because, well, it's a structure. It's not actually a defiant foe. So I know they are smart enough to make this work with defiant foes, but I hope that they make it at least function with structures as well. In competitive modes only, Quarry's Peril and Pult will grant 2 win 4 stacks to make it easier to access Hawkeye in high pressure situations. Lastly, the Cyclone Bow will now remember when it's set to auto attack. Okay, so I didn't really remember. Be sure to keep an eye out for a new pet to encounter in the Castora. The works with girl shots flock together tray. Ooh, we're getting a new pet. I like that. Gonna be excited. I hope it's as good as and well received as the bee was. A lot of people like the bee. Luminary Guardian. I'll be interested to see what they changed the icon to, but it's probably just gonna be that there, like that little torch thing. I reckon they'll just change it to that inside the icon. While reviewing the Luminary feedback, we saw a few of the same points being repeated constantly. The lack of Luminary specific virtues, the penalty for using too many Radiant weapons, and the low impact of the weapons themselves are the main issues that we're addressing. This is kind of true. When you played Luminary as a DPS, you pretty much went in, used your hammer, I believe, and then left. So pretty much you just wanted your buff and then you were leaving Tome as soon as possible because you didn't want to put it on cooldown. And you're basically trying to go in and out of Tome, upkeeping that buff from your 2 in Tome as much as possible. Or not 2 in Tome, 2 in, what's it called? In Forge mode or whatever it was called. I can't remember. We're introducing a set of Radiant virtues to replace the core Guardian virtues. We still want to capture some of the feeling of the core virtues with the shorter cooldowns and instant effects, but they will bring a bit more to the table. Each of the virtues will also power up the next usage of their respective Radiant weapon. The virtue of Justice empowering the hammer, the virtue of Resolve empowering the staff, and the virtue of Courage empowering the sword and shield. Our initial goal with the Shroud recharge time, which scaled with the number of weapons used, had been to create a more flexibility to dip in for a single Radiant weapon, for example using the shield to block an attack and then immediately exiting with a shorter cooldown. It became clear that scaling past the typical recharge time disincentivized interaction with the Shroud too much and felt like a significant penalty to the original intent. Yes. So by design, it kind of forced you to use the only one you wanted to use and then leave Shroud immediately. So it very much felt like, as much as they wanted you to be able to go in and out of Shroud, much more incentivize you to do it, you weren't really incentivized to do that. The only way to do that is to have specific buffs for each weapon that power you up for, like, say, DPS. So like having one that does power, maybe one that does ferocity, avoid precision, something along those lines. So it might be something they're looking at, but I don't know how they're going to fix this problem. We're reducing the maximum recharge time to 10 seconds, 15 in competitive modes, while continuing to grant a reduced recharge to unused weapons. This will allow players to get a small recharge reduction when using a single weapon without the downside of excessive recharge time when utilizing the full suit. Finally, Radiant Shroud has been renamed to Radiant Forge. Yes, good. I don't know why you called it a Shroud. It was always a Forge. Okay, it's way cooler to call it a Forge. It's kind of goated. I still think that this changes that they're making aren't going to address the problem that they have inside of the Shroud, but I don't really view it as a problem. I kind of view it as like the way the class plays out. But it's going to feel very much like Firebrand is my only concern. Is it's just going to feel like Core Guardian with a single tome and a single skill. So I feel like a lot of the time they probably have more like maybe making it like, my view is they should just make it that like you buff one version of the forge and you get 5 things in the forge based on that. So like, oh, all 5 of your forge skills are going to be hammer and they're all going to be goated. I think that'd be cooler, but some people might disagree with that. Paragon Warrior. Paragon feedback was largely focused on a few key areas, mainly utility skills lacked impact. Some traits felt a bit plain and the adrenaline was hard to come by. We did a pause on the utility skills to add some additional value. Brace Yourself now also grants protection to allies while protecting bonus adrenaline to the Paragon on both activation and echo. We Shall Return and Find Your Weakness also grant some bonus adrenaline on their respective echoes, with which we expect to play well with a reverberation trait to fuel the Paragon's chance. Okay. So they're just kind of trying to fuel up the adrenaline gain, which is good. If you ever play Heal Warrior, you kind of do struggle to some extent with adrenaline a lot of the time, but this seems like a good change. Feverish Pulse lacked depth to a Grandmaster Trait, so we folded the effects to Brisk Pacing to give it some additional power. This also frees up a slot in the Master Trait for an additional damage-focused trait. We also saw a lot of feedback that Paragon's damage potential wasn't quite there yet. Strengthening Stanzas moved out of the Grandmaster Trait tier to fill that slot, making room for a new Grandmaster Trait with a bit more active gameplay. This trait also grants bonus damage based on the current modifier tier. The same 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 10 thresholds used by chance, rewarding good resource management with a nice damage increase. Oh, I'm pretty sure that, like, the problem is that, like, I don't think Paragon's ever going to be able to compete with the likes of Berserker or, like, Bladesworn. Like, they're both insane damage. I think they would have much better luck making Paragon a good, like, Conduit build, focusing more on the condition aspect of the class, because it makes sense. Like, you're, like, yeah, inflicting conditions on them, but with, like, your shouts and stuff, but we'll see. Might not be too late for them to make that adjustment. I think it'd be a good change, but Ritualist Shroud lacks some impact. There was a lot of damage incoming from the Spirit's auto attacks, so putting a lot more damage into the Shroud skills themselves and adjusting some cooldowns to give more incentive to stick around in Shroud for a longer phase time. I'll be honest with you, when I played this, because I only played it as a healer, so my aspect of viewing the Ritualist as an Necromancer was like, okay, the way you base played this was like, you went into Shroud, you blew all your skills in Shroud, you got the fuck out as soon as possible, because the cooldown of Shroud almost matched the cooldown of the skills. So because the cooldowns were so long, it pretty much made it where it's like, okay, you used your skills, you blew up your Shroud skills, you're fucking out. Which is fine if that's the way you want the class to play out. If you want the class to basically be like, you dump all your skills, you get out, then hey, that's fine, that's good. But I don't think that's what they wanted from this class. They want this class to feel very much so like you're playing like a turret monster, like you're summoning your turrets, you know, like you're kind of like they're trying to feed into the Necromancer like idea without making it minions, because they don't really want to bring more minions to make AFK builds even more busted. The issue too was the damage on Rich List, from what I saw, was just really not there, which is just a balancing thing, can be easily fixed, but it's kind of like, how does the gameplay loop of the class feel? And it didn't really feel very interactive in a way that like changed the class. So like a lot of Necromancer skills, like you look at Reaper, you feel like the Reaper, you know what I mean? You feel like, and for the Harbinger, you feel like an alcoholic. You feel like a glass cannon, like you just down a couple of drinks, you know, like you're gonna get hit, you're gonna fall over, you know. So it felt very much so like the classes had their own identity. Like Harbinger has those movements, very cool projectiles. It felt very much like that. When I played Ritualist, I didn't really feel like I was playing Ritualist. I felt like I was playing like Necromancer, like Enchanter, is what I felt like I was playing. I felt like you were buffing your allies with the weapon skills, and you were pretty much like just going into Shroud to give buffs and leaving. That was pretty much it. It didn't really feel like a Ritualist as a healer. Like when you play Ritualist as a healer, I thought you would be like, okay, I very much think that what they should do to Ritualist is swap the weapon skills and the Shroud skills around. So make the... but then it doesn't kind of work the aesthetic, because if you don't take the utilities, you don't have the summons. It just kind of feels awkward. So they kind of push themselves into a weird place. The weapon skills feel really cool. I do like them. They're nice, unique effects, but that was just how I felt about them. Summon spirits while bringing a good amount of utility with its teleport and ability to reposition the spirits felt too simple when compared to the other iconic 5th Shroud skills. It will still teleport and bring the spirits along with you, but instead of causing them to perform an auto attack, each spirit will now use a new unique skill. Anguish will fire off a quick flurry of projectiles. Wanderlust will launch a larger projectile that dazes nearby enemies, and Preservation will create a protective barrier that destroys enemy projectiles. Okay, nice. So they're giving it some form of utility to the skills, which does lead me to believe they're balancing it more so around a healer as they are a DPS, which is fine. I think that's probably how they should do it. I don't really view this as a DPS. I don't see this competing with Harbinger, especially when you sacrifice HP on Harbinger to get like the most out of it. They do need to adjust the boons, though. The boons are really hard to upkeep even with max boon duration. Rupture skills brought powerful effects, but tearing down spirits was slightly opposed to the core fantasy of summoning and maintaining the spirits. We're rebranding them to an inert skill, e.g. Inert Anguish, to give Ritualists the feeling that channeling power through your spirits, the effects are still the same, but using the skills will no longer destroy the respective spirit. Good. Now it kind of feels like a Ritualist, where it's like now you're actually summoning your spirit and you're just using their empowered attack before they dissipate. Much better. Troubadour, the Mesmer. Troubadour has seen changes across the board over its beta performance and felt a little flat. Really? I don't think that Troubadour felt flat at all. I saw a lot of people playing Troubadour and I didn't really hear many bad things about it. But maybe I just like had a very limited experience with the way people were playing it. But yeah, this thing was slapping, dude. Like the Alacrity DPS trait was pretty good. Troubadour is seeing, there we go, sorry. Reverberating loot is becoming lively loot, sending damaging sounds towards your enemy while also sending healing tones towards your ally. The Harmonious Harp is also being updated to function as a channeled skill, having its healing condensed to give more impactful feel while also granting distortion at baseline. Okay, when you say granting distortion at baseline, you mean the giving distortion to your allies at baseline. Bro, they really went balls to the walls with the power creep if that's the case. Holy, that's broken. Group invuln is like insanely strong. Like that can be abused so hard. Like, dude, why would you run a chrono? I mean, actually, you probably still would run a chrono for Febe, just for the pure reason that chrono has C split for the portals. I'm pretty sure the new flower, do you need a C split as much? I don't, maybe not. I could see this being very good, like very strong now. But the thing about Chrono is you still have the reduced cooldown from having Alacrity, which is very powerful. And it's, yeah, just spot strat. Yeah, it's probably going to be spot strat Troubadour. True. Yep. This allows a Troubadour Harp to be a strong healing tool, while their loot can handle smaller amounts of more frequent healing. Nice. Alright, cool. Tails and their performance bonuses are also being adjusted for the healing and utility tails. The performance bonuses now grant notes for playing their matching instrument, and the abilities themselves will also be full strength. This allows more innate note generation while also making their usage more flexible. There's a decent amount of trait adjustments, both small and large. The minor traits are being fully reworked. The symphonic resonance now grants a unique bonus based on which instrument you are playing, such as movement speed for the drum, the small pulsar healing for the harp. Harmonize will now grant a note whenever you use a phantasm skill to improve note generation even more. Oh, damn. So now not only do you gain a clone or a note whenever you summon a clone, but you also get one whenever you summon a phantasm. So that makes, dude, that makes the power version insanely strong. Because like, if you think about it, when you run Greatsword or Spear, you summon 2 phantasms with your 4 skills. The empowered 4, obviously, for Spear, and the 2 whenever you run the trait for Greatswords. But like, that's going to be insane generation for power. It's going to be very, very strong. Troubadour has also been changed from granting allies Alacrity to granting quickness, and will do with the new Grandmaster Trait, Life of the Party, which grants boons to allies affected by your lively loot or crescendo skills. We hope that these changes, the next time you see Troubadour, it will strike the right chord. Dude, Guardian players are going to be in shambles. Firebrand is now competing with Troubadour. Oh, Druids are safe. Okay, Druids are safe from losing their jobs. Okay, I mean, they're still losing them because of Chrono, but, you know, this is going to be a nail in the coffin for Firebrand. Ooh, dude, that's rough. That is so rough. That's a yikes, dude. But it does mean that potentially we could be seeing a Chrono nerf. And I think the reason that they're giving it quickness is because they want to do stuff to the Alac DPS version of Mesmer, which is probably they're going to do something to the Mirage. That's the only reason I could see them changing the traits. Too quick was a world v world change? No, probably not, because ANET has specifically said in blog posts that they're trying to remove both quickness and Alacrity from world versus world. So I don't foresee them doing that. I don't really play that much world v world, but like in my mind, I feel like you're dumbing the game down when you remove that. It would be like, oh yeah, we're removing stability from that game mode. Like, it just feels like something that's not worth removing. So yeah. Guild Wars 2 Visions of Eternity launches soon. Thank you once again for playing in the beta and giving us your feedback. It is truly invaluable to have the community committed to helping us shape our game. Be sure to check out the official release notes when Guild Wars 2 Visions of Eternity goes live on October 28th to see all of the changes we're making. And as always, we're keeping our eye on the forums and elsewhere for feedback of the expansion launches. Until next time, we'll see you in the mists. Okay. There's still quickness on Firebrand and yeah, but the quickness on Firebrand and Chrono is very minimal. So like overall it seems to be pretty good. I don't think so. Like, I'll be honest with you, I didn't play as much of like the Amalgam because it was kind of broken, dude. I don't really get off by playing the broken stuff as much. Like, it's kind of a meme. I don't know if this is gonna save the thief mains that hate this antiquary. Like, you either hate it or you love it. The Conduit, the changes seem good. It's definitely going to be a buff overall to the power, depending on how they do it. And then we'll see how it plays out to the Condi. I think that it's probably going to be a kind of goated DPS, I think. I think they're going to overbuff it, especially since I never really said anything on it, and a lot of people didn't really talk about the Conduit. Like, a lot of people thought the Conduit was very bad. And the Conduit was alright. Like, the Conduit was actually kind of, it was fine. At least for the Condi version. The power version was kind of a bit of a meme. The power version really needed work. Yeah, dude, the Evoker is just... Bro, I could see the Evoker being either really broken on release or being nerfed into the ground to the point where everyone goes and plays Amalgam. Like, the thing is that the Gale Shot, I think, is probably going to be really strong and really fun to play. I think the Luminary, they would need to buff it to make it a bit stronger, and the Paragon's probably just going to be a heal. The other thing I think they did, the reason why they made the they changed around the healers, now that I'm looking at them, is like if I look at these, right? I see like the boons that they give, right? So if I look at Amalgam, right? I think Amalgam was Alacrity potentially, which is why I think they moved. And Luminary was Alacrity. Evoker was Quickness. Gale-Shot was Quickness. Luminary was Alacrity. Paragon was Alacrity. Richless was Quickness. Troubadour is now Quickness. So from that, we're getting what? 2 heal Alacrities, 2 heal Quicknesses. We're getting a bit more in the quick, like we're not really getting too many quick DPSs. So I think it's good that they made the Troubadour quick DPS, especially but it's going to be interesting to see if it competes, because I think we definitely need a lot more power DPS Alacrity options within the game. I think they would be much better off moving the Troubadour back to Alacrity. Currently, Alacrity is just kind of like, you look at the power options, it's like, what have you got? You know what I mean? Like, there's not really that many options. Like, you got Renegade, which is goated in fractals. Everywhere else is kind of meh. You know what I mean? Like, you've got you've got the new Fire Tempest build, which is pretty good. So there's options. I definitely think, like, at the end of the day, they could always just change what the trait does. But I think it's nice for them to have stuff that gives the class a bit more flexibility. I like the idea of potentially the Evoker being able to give either Quickness or if you more trait line towards the Otter, or Alacrity if you more trait line towards the Toad, and then to make them play out a different way, where the Toad was more to do with barrier, shielding, and the Otter was more to do with healing, you know, that sort of stuff. I think that would have been pretty cool. But it seems they've got a set way where they want to make the class feel like you want to use more than just the one legend, which is good. I honestly like what the changes are. I can't really say these Conduit changes seem to be pretty big. They're adding more mechanics to the class, which is nice because it means higher skill expression, but I don't know how it's going to play over. So we're going to have to wait and see how that correlates. I definitely think they needed to rework the trait to basically using a weapon or a legend skill gave you like the currency for the legend, the affinity. But yeah, the art for it is really good. It's beautiful. The team at ANET always does beautiful art. It's actually why I miss their old story steps where they used to have like the beautiful artwork behind the characters as they were talking and that sort of stuff. But no, I'm pretty happy with the changes overall. I don't really have too many issues with it. It's more so going to end up being how these feel and play out in PvE, which is always going to be a balance thing. So yeah, it'll definitely be an interesting side. I'll definitely be playing heaps of Conduit on release. Okay, I'm going to be that Conduit guy again. Okay, and I think that's it, guys. Thanks again for watching. Okay.